Production of Real Ag is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.
I keep reading about engineered corn, but I don't know what that means.
Spring water, purified water, what's the difference?
Is imported beef safe for my family?
Consumers want to know the facts about the products they buy. That's where Real Ag comes in. From plant to plant and from pasture to plate, Kyle Bauer and the Real Ag crew find the facts to help you sort the truth and help you understand Real Ag. Now here's your host, Kyle Bauer.
When your food is made, there are a lot of leftover products. Is this extra stuff of any use? Industrial uses of farm products is our topic tonight on Real Ag. First, let's define industrial uses. We're referring to non-food uses of products that we usually think of as food. Corn, soybeans, and even beef can become products used in factories, power plants, and even your home and car.
Soybean oil and soybean meal. The raw soybeans, roughly 18 to 19% oil, and then the remainder of that would be hulls and then the soybean meal. The soybean meal is mostly used for animal feed, and that's the biggest consumer of the soybeans. It goes into the feed for livestock, which we all know, whether it's you're feeding hogs or chickens or dairy cattle, they all use soybean. Soybean oil can be used in basically anything that you use petroleum-based oil in now. Some of the things that most people have probably heard about is of course, biodiesel is one of the first things, and probably the biggest user of soybean oil. Some of the industrial uses that they're used for soybeans, we use in adhesives, paints, plastics, foam, insulation. We are doing some work where we'd use meal because, most of the product industrial uses now is been through the soybean oil. But we have been doing some work with the soybean meal for adhesives in the plywood construction. Most of that so far has just been for indoor, type plywoods for your, cabinet grade plywoods, where they use hardwood veneers on them and interior stuff. And we've also used some adhesives in some of the oriented strand board in interior purposes, but they are working on some adhesives that would work for exterior purposes, and that's where some of the soy flours and stuff that we started using to make them adhesives. Some of the other products that people might not be aware of is they've used oil in some of the adhesives that put on the back of carpeting. K-State's new football turf that was put down last year was all come out of a company from out of Dalton, Georgia. It's the AstroTurf brand, but they use all their adhesives for that is all soy-based adhesives on the back of that.
There are a lot of other uses for sunflower oil. We're finding out more and more every day as we have conversations with people who call us and see us on the website. We have a lot of conversations with soap makers. There's a lot of companies right here in Kansas that are making natural soaps without any harsh chemicals or anything like that. And sunflower oil works perfectly with that. Also candle makers. A lot of them here in Kansas as well as all over the country. We ship oil to them every day that use it in making candles, all sorts of cosmetics, lotions, creams, scrubs, things like that. There's different applications that we've worked with people in the as a lubricant. One of our customers it's a food manufacturing plant, and they can't use any petroleum-based lubricants, and sunflower oil is a wonderful substitute for that, and so we sell it that way as well.
One well-known use of corn, soybeans, and other similar crops is to produce fuel.
Biodiesel has been around a long time. The manufacture of it came from the soap industry. And when soap became a factory-made product, the liquid left over was methyl ester, which is a compound formed from the oils, the lipids. Biodiesel is basically the liquid co-product of making soap, or soap is a co-product of making biodiesel, whichever way you want it. It's made using a vegetable oil or animal fat. Can be from any source, as long as it's organically made by the animal or by the plant. And the reaction is a chemical reaction between the oil and ethyl alcohol. And you can use methyl alcohol, but it's a little harder to handle. But methyl alcohol is put in about 10% of the liquid volume, and the reaction takes place, and you get by a chemical formula, chemical reaction, and you get a product called methyl ester, which is biodiesel, and the co-product is glycerin, which is used in the soap industry and other industries, cosmetics. Many industries use the co-product. Before we made biodiesel, the co-product of making glycerin for soap manufacture was this liquid, which is methyl ester. And so it's kind of switched roles. When we make biodiesel, the co-product is glycerin. The catalyst is sodium hydroxide, and that remains unchanged because it's a catalyst. And we have to separate that out then in the end. So basically what we get out of 100 pounds of vegetable oil or animal fat, we get 90 pounds of methyl ester and 10 pounds of glycerin. So that's, and then you take the methyl ester and purify it, separate out the catalyst, and that's biodiesel. We have markets that have developed due to production of biodiesel. One of them is they call it yellow grease, which is the restaurant grease that's they used to flush down the sewers. That grease is now valuable. The restaurants used to pay to have it taken away. Now they get paid for taking. We have a plant at Mineola, Kansas, that has stations arranged with restaurants along I-70 from Russell to Goodland to pick up their fat. And that they take it to Mineola and make biodiesel out of it. We have a plant, a hog producing firm has a big slaughterhouse at Guyman, Oklahoma on the north side, and you'll see next to it tanks and so on. They have a biodiesel plant in connection with their pork processing plant, that they use that animal fat directly into that plant. That's called a white grease, because same thing as tallow from the slaughterhouses in southwest Kansas. Almost all of that is going into a biodiesel arrangement. But the renderers really weren't active for another year or so. In about 2003, EPA, or whatever the controlling agencies are, shut down landfills for the deposition of grease. You could no longer put grease in the landfill. So that left the rendering, which takes care of the used cows, you might say, left the renderers out on a limb as to what to do with their grease. Well, they were already, some of them associated with the National Biodiesel Board, so they became a very active part of the National Biodiesel Board. Now, some of the soybean interests were a little bit miffed, but they realized, well, here we feed all these animals, and the renderers want to take that and make a product out of it, and so it all works together. We're all we're all working toward the same goal of making available good food at a cheaper price, because we're taking care of these wastes that would have caused problems in the environment. The ultra-low sulfur diesel needed lubricity. This is a strong point of biodiesel. It increases the lubricity noticeably in the oil in the system. You see, your injector pump is lubricated by the fuel. The formula for biodiesel is very close to what comes off at the refinery and called diesel. They're organic compounds. Now, at a refinery, it's a mixture that comes off between several different temperatures. And they get number 1 diesel at a higher temperature, or a lower temperature. Number 2 diesel, that takes more heat to get number 2, and you get down and got road tar, you know, in the end. Those are mixtures. Biodiesel is a chemical compound with a specific chemical formula. So that's why biodiesel made from the various feedstocks, whether it be castor beans or soy oil or canola or animal fat or whatever, it's all basically the same formula. Now, there's a little bit of difference in the way the source material biodiesel that comes out of a source material is slight different. Like castor bean tends to have a cloud point or have a filter problem at a higher temperature than, say, canola does. Soybean is kind of in the middle, which is all right, but we treat up to 20% biodiesel in a blend, just like in the wintertime we treat it just like regular diesel. We 50-50 with a kerosene or number 1 diesel. So those things, as we've known those things for a long time.
I think probably what happened and what's held up some of that development in years past is that petroleum oil was just so cheap to use, and with the price of crude is where it's going now, it's just made the soybeans more cost competitive. The government has been on a big push for all the products that they use to try to make a newer or renewable, more green product that they use around in their, and that's where soybeans have really helped in that. We help, the United Soybean Board does do research with, or does work with certain contractors that help to promote the use of soybean products at the government level. And they keep lists of products that will meet certain renewable standards.
This initiative to use farm products in conjunction with petrochemicals has a strong economic impact.
In 2011, the research, animal research nutritionist at the Agriculture Research Center at Hayes was wondering why his cost of soybean meal had come down or had not gone up with the rest of the ration he was feeding. And I explained to him how in 2011 we really were ramping up again the production of biodiesel.
The vast majority of the soybean will be consumed in the livestock sector for that. But then in that process, and in years past that process, the price of and the usage of soybean meal drove the price of soybeans. And that is one of the reasons that the industrial use was pushed as a way to use some of the soybean oil. Of course, the soybean oil is, people think of it as vegetable oil they see on the grocery shelf. That's most of that. When you buy a bottle of soybean or vegetable oil, that's usually soybean oil if you read the back. But that, human consumption of oil, soybean oil, was just a small amount. And industrial uses help to increase demand for soybean oil, because during the processing of the soybean into meal and oil, there was usually enough demand for the soybean meal, but all the extra oil that was around there was actually creating a lag. The processors didn't have a place to go with the soybean oil, and that helped. Since they had excess soybean oil, that actually lowered the prices, whether it be like we discussed earlier, or the biodiesel we've created demand for soybean oil. And right now, I can't give you the figures, but the National Biodiesel Board says that the price of soybean oil is trading on an energy factor. They've got a formula they could use that says if price of crude is so much, you can figure out, and that'll figure out the price of soybean oil, and that seems to be what it trades at. But by using it, creating the demand for the soybean oil, yes, it's raised the price of soybeans up, but it is also, in the long run, has actually lowered the price of soybean meal in relation to what it used to be.
One of the problems in our commodities and our renewable fuels has been price of the final product, how that affects the price of gasoline, how that affects the price of food. Absolutely, there is no increase of price of food using the protein from soy biodiesel production. That protein is probably going to be cheaper.
These products also have an environmental impact.
It's a 7 billion gallon market, so we're going to have to import diesel to that area, and it's such a large market that train cars and semis would clog the system. So we're trying to get it to be approved in pipelines. And this is a whole nother project of the National Biodiesel Board, is getting approval in a multi-purpose pipeline which carries gasoline, diesel, and kerosene and all the different fuels. Whole industry, the petroleum industry, the pipeline industry, and the biodiesel industry, and the heating oil industry are all working to get approval of 100 parts per million carryover into aviation fuel. And all this is being tested, and it's taken millions of dollars to do this, but this is so that the cities can have cleaner air, because many cities in New England, and there's 5 states basically that's 85% of the market, heat with heating oil. So it's very important that we get all this done. And we're just about complete, just about have all the testing done. The energy balance, the energy in versus the energy out is, energy out is 5.5 to 1 compared to what the energy in. It's the highest energy balance of any of the alternative fuels. And we can say that without any reservation. So the consumer, if they use biodiesel, is actually reducing the amount of carbon within the Clean Air Acts and so on. So, and I think the people in the cities want to breathe cleaner air. The people on the kids on the school bus want to breathe cleaner air. And all of these things in the world, diesel engines do most of the work, and it's very important. So it's not just the United States that's interested in cleaning things up, but the whole world is interested in cleaner burning engines, and they're more efficient. In the late 1800s is when they started making soap at factories. And biodiesel at that time was used as a penetrator, a grease remover. It dissolves things, and this is kind of one of the things problem it has in putting it into automotive or aircraft thing is the elasters and the seals and the rubber hoses and all that stuff. And all the metals have to be tested. So, but initially they didn't worry about that because this gunk you put on an engine and wash it off with a hose, that's methyl ester basically. Biodiesel is not toxic, it's biodegradable. If you spill it, you don't have to have the hazmat people. You just wash it down with a fire hose, or if it's on a city street or something.
One thing is certain, as technology improves, new and better uses for these products will be found.
Specifically, it was in the 1990s that a formal move was made to add value to a dog on the market, which was soybean oil. because we're making a lot more soybean meal for the world, and we're producing a lot more soybeans.
Probably I would say the reason it hasn't been used in the past is, first off, is making the change. People were used to using petroleum-based oils and such in their things, and why make the change? And I think the efforts through the United Soybean Board, with their work to expand the use of soybean, we got people to try it and found out that it would make for a good substitute. And right now with the, I want to say the green revolution, whatever, to try to use more renewable products, soybeans are starting to fill that void as manufacturers look for items that they can save so they can put a green label on what they're selling, and the soybeans help fit that.
Glycerin is, pound for pound, has more energy in it than a pound for pound with propane. So there's a lot of energy left into that glycerin, which isn't, can't use that in an engine. So a researcher in Johnson County, an engineer, came up with this idea of running it through a reformer, pulling off the hydrogen. Glycerin is very full of hydrogen, pulling the hydrogen off and some of the carbon monoxide, running a spark ignition engine with that product, and generating electricity. And this is, think of it in terms of, and he thinks of it in terms of a biodiesel plant that makes biodiesel. It will generate enough heat for the process of making biodiesel, which doesn't require near the heat that ethanol requires. And also then they generate, the electricity generated runs the electrical parts of the plant, and he figures there's be electricity left over to go on the grid with. So it's a win-win situation. You take a co-product and put value to it. We're talking about putting value to things that were low value to start with, like vegetable oil and animal fat and used fry grease. They're very low product items. So if we can add value to that, then the protein, which we're growing soybeans for mainly, is the protein. And so we can keep the price of the protein in the food chain at a lower rate and shift some of that cost of growing soybeans and processing soybeans over to the biodiesel. So it's really unique, and it's the most renewable fuel we have on the market.
I think the limiting factor why people haven't probably done it so much is it just takes time to know how the actual use of the soybean oil in their formulations, what has to be done to make it work just as well as the other, and that just takes time. And that's where the United Soybean Board has helped to fund many of these projects and paid for, so that the companies will try the soybean in that, and most of them find out that it is very usable.
They're taking the sludge from sanitary sanitary sewer systems of cities, and there's a sludge left over that is still rich in energy, and there's the processes of using bacteria to pull that energy out, and the energy that's in the bacteria then is converted to an oil, and we use that, or not an oil, well, grease or whatever you want to call it, and that is available to make biodiesel.
Soybean oil is also used in transformers right now. The old transformer fluids were not a good thing if they were spilled, let's put it that way. And the soybean oil, the process that they use to make it for the transformers made something, so if they do have a spill, it's very benign to the environment. So,
in New York City, the biggest biodiesel plants are in Brooklyn and Queens, New York, using the waste oil and the waste grease from their traps at restaurants. All restaurants have to have traps to make biodiesel. They're very interested in biodiesel there because of they use a lot of oil heat, When you mix biodiesel with the heating oil, it's called bioheat. And bioheat, if you mix at least 11.5% of methyl ester or biodiesel with the heating oil, it is as clean as natural gas, or cleaner than natural gas on emissions.
That wraps it up for this episode of Real Ag. We hope the information presented here gives you a better understanding of these emerging technologies. On behalf of the Real Ag crew, I'm Kyle Bauer, helping you sort the truth and helping you understand Real Ag.
Production of Real Ag is made possible in part by an underwriting grant from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.